All right, take three. Hello, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. First, I had to go back in and get a coat, or I would not have been able to sit here and talk to y'all. Okay, so it's no secret, watchers of this channel, fellow Vikings, that I highly recommend moving to the Ozarks as a bug out location, as a move now, bug out now, come out of her, my people, come to the Ozarks, right? And I've gone over that ad nauseum, and it struck me this morning that maybe that's not so helpful for some of you, probably most of you, and so that I think today what I'll cover is things to consider for your SHTF relocation planning. But first, cue the intro. A book recommendation. Good book. All right. For the vast majority of you, your work is important, meaning you have to work. You are not independently wealthy. You need to make income. Something to consider when relocating out of the hellhole in which you now live of suburbia, or even worse, a city, is changing your job. Yes, it's possible. People do it all the time. Taking a different job. Another thing to consider is that if you move to some parts of the country, you won't have to make nearly as much money as you are now to get things done. If you're spending more time growing food and raising critters, that's less money you have to spend, that kind of thing. And so, as far as occupation goes, one, consider changing your job to suit where you want to move. And two, see if you can get a job that allows you to work from a computer. There's a lot of jobs like that where they don't really care where you are as long as you log in. My son's father-in-law has such a job and gets paid pretty good money. A couple of the Shofarian brothers have such jobs and get paid pretty good money. I know other people who basically work through computers doing a variety of things. There's just so many things that you can do. You just have to have a way to jack in and you're off to the races. So consider that. Start investigating some of that on your own, looking for, excuse me, a new line of work that would be more suitable for where you want to move. You want to move, so that's one. And I don't have a list, I don't have a list here that I'm looking at, but I thought about it this morning. Another thing you want to consider when you're moving to your, and I hesitate to call it bug out location. I think you should move now and get yourself set up and then have a bug out location from there. But I think you should move to I've had some coffee. I'm talking very quickly. You've heard me say this before. If your plan A in the event of crisis SHTF is to go from where you are to bug out from where you are to your bug out location, if that's plan A, you need a new plan, right? You should be living in the place you think you're going to be able to make a go of it and then still have a bug out plan. So if you're one of those people, if you're living in the suburbs or a city, you need to move now to a better place. I think you should look for a place that is rural, but still within relatively easy driving distance. I'd say an hour of things you find important, like hospitals. Hospitals are kind of important. You should be within an hour of a hospital, and you probably will be. There's very few places to go in this country where you're not. Is culture important to you? And when I say culture, I mean, do you Jones for, going to the symphony or the opera? Okay, you might want to consider that when you move. University towns usually have a fair amount of culture, right, that you can participate in. And many universities are already in rural areas. And so you get outside of that and you're very, very rural. But you want to be in a rural, and I submit agricultural area. And when I say agriculture, I know that's a big term. The people in this rural area should be producing food. I think producing food on a non-industrial scale, meaning around here in the Ozarks, which is, obviously I think this is the best place, I moved here, but there's other places like this. Around here in the Ozarks there are many small landholders. You know, they only have like 150, 100, 200 acres. That's considered small in many parts of the country. And so there's many different herds of cattle or herds of goats or herds of sheep. In this part of the Ozarks that I'm in, there's not a lot of crop growing, like corn and soybeans and wheat and stuff like that. Most people around here have vegetable gardens, but that's not on a large scale. Although the Hmong people are growing gardens, pretty large gardens that they then take to farmers markets and sell. But you want to be in an area that produces food, where the average person out there produces food, so that food in the area is not an immediate problem. The reason I said non-industrial is, you know, our corn, our wheat, and our soy, but you don't want to eat soy anyway, that depends a lot on, you know, machines and petroleum and fertilizer and weed killer and just all this stuff, and it's going to kind of fall apart when the system falls apart, right? And it won't be producing a lot. And still, that's better than the suburb or the city, because typically in those types of areas, they have lots of feed stored up, lots of corn and soy stored up in big silos and stuff. And I think that would probably be made available through one means or another to the local populace, which means they won't starve, right? So an agricultural area, an area that, in other words, not necessarily a logging area. You know, I don't know if logging's even considered agriculture, but I mean, you're dealing with trees. But you know, that's not food, right? So consider that when you pick an area. Another thing to consider, and it kind of just happens if you pick an agricultural area, is to pick a conservative, politically speaking, area. You don't want a whole lot of people around you who are against guns, who are going to vote out your guns before the other states do, thus making it a problem for you one way or another. Whether you give them up or not, it's going to be a problem if your state says no guns are allowed or something like that. You don't want a lot of people around you on EBT, on government handouts, because that's just a sickness mentality that infects people, and those people will be all around you when the balloon goes up. And so go to a conservative area. Now, when I said move to an agricultural area, most agricultural areas are conservative because those people work for a living and they value work, right? So there you go. But, you know, there's little hamlets around here that when you drive in, one of the Shofarians is a law enforcement officer, and he said when he goes into a place, he notices the number of pedestrians, because Americans don't walk anywhere anymore. They drive to the mailbox. They'll drive 5 parking places down to go to another store in a strip mall. They're so lazy. And so when you see people walking, it's usually because they can't drive legally, and that's an indicator of potential problems. And there are some methed out little towns out here in these hills, and you can tell pretty quick when you get into one. But I don't want you to live in a town. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should live outside of a town, and those meth heads aren't coming too far out of town. All right, get you some big livestock guardian dogs and don't worry about it. But they're really not. So yeah, an agricultural area, a conservative area, just so that people value work and don't mind you having guns, right? Because you're going to need guns, probably. I mean, you're going to want to have guns. How about that? You're going to want to have the ability to protect what is yours. And so there has to be, for most of you, some type of job available, right? You're going to have to make money. Now, I laugh at YouTube when people tell me, oh, there's no jobs in the Ozarks. That's right. Nobody has a job in the Ozarks. Nobody raises families in the Ozarks. Nobody sends their kids to college from the Ozarks. There's jobs everywhere. You know, anywhere in the country, there's jobs, except maybe Detroit. And so it's just what kind of job? You know, what are you willing to do to have this lifestyle? You don't have to make $200,000. You may really want to, and if you do, okay. So there's that. Another thing, back to the jobs, because I had a job like this I had a job where I traveled. Not the ideal, but certainly doable. You know, when I went to work, I would go to the airport, get on an airplane, and go somewhere and do things and get paid ridiculous amounts of money, and then come home and spend it on the place, right? And so that's a way to do it also. So travel for your work. Travel for your work, an agricultural area, a conservative area. Okay, here's something else to consider: weather. As we age, weather affects us a little bit more. Now, are there old Eskimos? Yes. Are there old tribal people living in the Kalahari Desert? Yes. So, you know, you can endure extremes, but it sure gets nicer when you don't have to endure super cold winters and super hot summers. Makes it easier. For me, I ruled out the northern tier of states because I didn't want to handle the cold. Now, there are probably people in Alaska who are laughing at this little wussy Green Beret, right? You big baby. It was 80 below and I was out running my trap line. You know, okay. There is something to be said for it. You know, you can get used to anything, right? But I think you should consider weather. You should consider the impact of weather. Is 12 feet of snow going to be a problem for you? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe you're just going to do what Sister Kate and I do, and when you can't get out, it's like, cool, we're staying in, you know, no problem. But it is something to consider, weather, when you're looking at places. I don't like super cold. I don't like super hot. And I don't actually mind the hot. Here's what I mind: bugs in greater numbers than here in the Ozarks, and no water, as in the desert, right? I think the desert's beautiful, and I tell people I could live in the desert if it wasn't for the lack of water, which sounds stupid, but I mean, I like the way the desert looks. I love the way it smells. I like how the different lighting hits it. I think it's gorgeous. I don't mind the heat in the desert. I've operated in it, existed in it, but man, you got to have water, right? And that's not one of the things, you know, one of my list. Of course you have to have water. That's duh, you know. I'm not even going to make that a requirement. You should know that you have to have water. But consider your seasons, right? I like having 4 seasons. I like having a cold season because it does keep the bugs down. That's why Florida has so darn many bugs, because they rarely freeze them out and kill them. You're going to want an area, no matter what, where you can grow food in large amounts, as in all the food you're going to need eventually. Do I grow all the food I need now? No, but you're going to need to eventually, and so you should pick an area where that can happen. Now, having said that, you can do that in probably most of the United States, except maybe Alaska. It kind of goes with rural conservative areas, but an area where people hunt is a good thing, right? It's an attitude of the people that goes around. An area, I'll just use the term, with rednecks in it, is not bad, right? I know there are many sophisticated people here on this channel who are like, oh my God, I don't want to be surrounded by rednecks. Well, for one thing, it's not like in the movies, you know, they're not as bad as all that. I think I am a redneck to some degrees. My wife says I'm a white collar redneck, although I'm no longer white collar, so there you go. But you know, the stereotypical redneck, if you're a sophisticated urbanite right now, and you're fearing living around rednecks, you know what rednecks are? They're people who don't mind being outdoors in all kinds of weather. They're people who like pursuing outdoor activities, fishing, hunting, driving their four-wheelers, driving their four-wheel drive vehicles. I think you can probably safely say rednecks like to drink beer. um, you know, they like both kinds of music, country and Western. Um, but, you know, generally outdoorsy people are people who are going to transition better to the new way. Hank Jr., A Country Boy Will Survive, right? I mean, it's a great song. And there's a lot of truth to that. Is it, I can hear arguments against that now. Yes, of course, nothing holds true across everything, but there you go. Where to look? Maine does fascinate me. I kind of want to get to Maine someday, and I'll tell you why Maine fascinates me. I remember, I like maps. I look at maps a lot. And I remember a long time ago, man, I think I was in high school, I was looking at a road atlas, and I was just kind of looking through all the states, and I noticed like I haven't looked at it for a while, the top 2/3 of Maine just had like a couple straight dirt roads, unimproved dirt roads going through it. And I found out later it's like mostly owned, or it was, I don't know if it still is, somebody here will tell me, mostly owned by timber companies. And you're allowed to go out there to a certain degree and do things, but it's like all this massive amounts of no people. I thought that was cool. And I guess there's little towns and villages up there, but you know, according to Stephen King, people in Maine are weird. I have friends who live in upstate New York, the Finger Lakes region and stuff like that. It looks beautiful. I don't know about the population flow coming out of, you know, Connecticut and New York City and all that. I don't know how that flows. I don't know if it's good. I know that the laws are horrible, right? Try to take a gun into, you know, try to take this into New York. Yeah, not so good. I know, I'm sure there's ways to do it. What's Rawls call it? The redoubt, I think he calls it. What is that? You know, like eastern Washington and Oregon and Wyoming and Idaho and western Montana, parts of that. Probably the weather gets really cold there in the wintertime, which might keep, you know, panhandlers out. The mosquitoes can be atrocious in some places in the summertime. There's an awful lot of Californians moving into Boise and western Montana and ruining it. And they're going to bring their attitudes and their laws, you know, change the laws and all that stuff coming. Oregon and Washington have about just gone over to the communist side, you know, so, but you could probably make a go of it there, especially in northern Idaho. The people there are kind of rugged, standoffish kind of people, mountain people, right? I don't know a lot about Wyoming or Utah or anything like that. I don't know. But that might be worth looking at. I think one could make a go of it in parts of the Great Plains. I really do. There's a lot of places out away from the major cities, and I'm talking North and South Dakota and Kansas and, you know, through that Nebraska, through that swath, where there's just a lot of nothing out there. And maybe you could make a go of it out there. A potential problem is all our nuclear sites and that are going to get targeted in some scenarios, which are then going to create a lot of fallout and badness. I mean, you'd have to consider that. But, you know, whenever I drive through southern Kansas, you know, south of I-70, man, it's just like, I wouldn't call it wilderness because there's not a whole lot of trees, and I like trees, but it's a lot of country out there with not a lot of people in it. And you know, I think you might be able to make a go of it. I have no idea what property prices are. That's something else. You're going to have to be able to afford the property you buy, right? You should probably decide what your budget is. How much money can you spend on your land, on your place? I laugh at people who say they don't have enough money. That's a lie that they tell themselves. You do have enough. If you have a job at all, you have enough money. My friend and brother Chris, he did not have a high-paying job, and they are now living the dream on 10 acres that they bought in the Ozarks, and they did not have a lot of money. And so I look at it and say, you know what, if he can do it and thrive, you can do it and thrive if you want to. You just have to decide you want to. So those are some things to consider. I'm not going to give you a list. You know, if I did this on YouTube and put up a map with like circles on it where to go, I'd get 10,000 hits on it, because everybody wants the answer. People don't want to do the work to find their own answer. People don't want to take responsibility for themselves making decisions, or as one of my instructors would say, taking decisions. But yeah, you need to come out of those cities. You need to come out of those population centers. People are going to be a problem when this whole thing goes up. And the people that are around you, you want to be good people. My wife and I have this joke: they's po' white trash, but they's good people. Might apply to us. Don't take offense. Something else to consider. I probably should have, made a list. Building codes. It's cool to be in a place with no building codes. It's cool to be in a poor county. Somebody asked recently on one of the comments, what are property taxes? Until we started improving this place, and I have much land, we were paying like $200 and something a year in taxes a year. When we improved it, it went up once we put buildings and roads and stuff, wells on it. But yeah, taxes are cheap here. But because taxes are cheap, man, like just until this year, they didn't do anything to the roads when ice or snow hit it. Nothing. No vehicles coming down and taking care of the road. County services, you know, I need to get this done, I need to get that done. My road coming in here is atrocious. The county road is atrocious. I like that. Keeps the riffraff out. But, you know, don't expect a lot. If you're not paying a lot of taxes, you're not going to get a lot of help. But you shouldn't want a lot of help if you have a self-sufficient mindset. And building codes, there are none where I live. No building codes. I can build whatever the heck I want, however I want it, and I like that. Now, the downside of that is if you live right next to a neighbor, he could do the same thing. He could build some abomination that you have to stare at every day. Pick your land wisely when you do. But yeah, I can build however I want out here. So there's that. All right. I hope that at least there's something to think about. I don't think we have a lot of time. Of course, I've been saying that for a while. So, you know, truth in advertising. But the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, fruit tree. Next best time is right now. Get on it. Start getting stuff going. You are not getting any younger. All right, I'll see you out there.